My name is Laura Benson. I'm 36 years old, an orthopedic surgeon at one of the top hospitals in Minneapolis, and a single mother to a 5-year-old girl named Emma. 2 months ago, I was lying in the back of an ambulance with a metal rod sticking out of my left leg, blood soaking through my scrubs, watching a paramedic cut away the fabric while I typed a desperate message to my family with shaking hands. Emma was at daycare. Pickup was in 40 minutes. I couldn't feel my toes. I sent the message to our family group chat, the one my mother created years ago, the one she named Benson Family Forever, with a little heart emoji. 3 words: please help, emergency. The response came 90 seconds later. Not a phone call, not a frantic "where are you?" A text message from my mother that I will remember until the day I die. "Laura, you've always been exhausting. We're at Kelsey's gallery opening. Handle it yourself." I read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. Then my sister, Kelsey, responded, not with concern, not with questions, just an eye roll emoji. That was it. That was all I was worth to them while I lay bleeding in an ambulance, wondering if I'd ever walk again. My father didn't respond at all. The paramedic, a young guy named Derek, was watching me. I didn't realize he could see my screen until he spoke. "Ma'am, is someone coming to help with your daughter?" His voice was careful, gentle, like he already knew the answer. I looked at that message one more time. 9 years, $412,000, every mortgage payment, every insurance premium, every emergency, every time they called saying they were in a bind, and I transferred money without question. 9 years of being their safety net, their ATM, their reliable Laura who never complained and always managed. And this was what I was worth: an eye roll emoji and a dismissal. Something cracked open inside me in that ambulance. Not my leg, though that was shattered too. Something deeper, something that had been holding together for 36 years finally gave way. "I need to make some calls," I told Derek, "and I need you to screenshot those messages from my phone before it dies." He nodded slowly, his eyes soft with something that looked like recognition. "Yeah, I can do that." From that ambulance, with blood on my hands and my daughter's face flashing through my mind, I made 3 calls. The first was to an emergency childcare service. Triple the rate, I didn't care. The second was to my neighbor Ruth, the only person in my life who had ever shown up without being asked. And the third was to a lawyer I'd met at a hospital fundraiser 6 months earlier. Because I was done. Done being their burden. Done being their checkbook. Done buying love that should have been free. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. Let me tell you about the $412,000 I spent trying to earn a place in my own family. Before I continue, drop your city in the comments. I want to know where this story is reaching today. And if you've ever been the family member everyone takes for granted, the one who gives and gives while everyone else just takes, type me in the comments. This story is for you. I became a doctor because I wanted to fix things: broken bones, torn ligaments, shattered joints. There's something satisfying about taking something that's damaged and making it whole again. Maybe that's why I spent so long trying to fix my family, too. I graduated top of my class at University of Minnesota Medical School, finished my orthopedic surgery residency at Mayo Clinic. By 32, I was making $420,000 a year, performing surgeries that gave people back their ability to walk, to run, to hold their children. I was good at my job, really good. The kind of good that gets you published in medical journals and invited to speak at conferences. But none of that ever seemed to matter to my parents. To them, I was just practical Laura, reliable Laura, the daughter who could handle things on her own. My sister Kelsey was different, 3 years older, effortlessly beautiful, with this artistic temperament that my parents found endlessly fascinating. When Kelsey announced at 17 that she wanted to be a painter, my mother cried happy tears. My father called her our little visionary and immediately started researching art schools. When I announced at 15 that I wanted to be a surgeon, my father nodded once. "That's practical. You'll always have a job." That was the extent of his enthusiasm. Kelsey got her art studio funded, her supplies paid for, her trips to Europe for inspiration. I got a nod and the assumption that I'd figure it out myself. And I did. Scholarships, loans, endless hours of studying, while my sister posted photos from Florence and Barcelona. The financial support started 9 years ago, right after I finished my residency. My father called me one evening, his voice tight with embarrassment. "Laura, we're in a bit of a bind. The mortgage payment is due and things are tight this month. Could you help us out just this once?" Just this once. I transferred $2,800 that night without hesitation. They were my parents, of course I would help. That's what family does. That's what I told myself as I watched the money leave my account and felt a small glow of satisfaction. Finally, I could be useful to them. Finally, I could matter. But just this once became every month. The mortgage was $2,800. Then my father's company dropped their health insurance coverage, and suddenly I was paying $950 a month for their premiums, too. Then came the emergencies: the car that needed a new transmission, the roof that leaked during a spring storm, the furnace that died in January. I never said no, not once. And then there were the loans to Kelsey. She'd call me crying about a gallery that fell through, a collector who backed out, a studio space she couldn't afford. I'd transfer the money and she'd promise to pay me back as soon as her next show sold. Those payments never came. The debt just accumulated. $45,000 to my sister over 9 years, not a single penny returned. I kept a spreadsheet. I don't know why exactly. Maybe some part of me needed to see it in black and white, needed evidence that I wasn't imagining the weight I was carrying. Every transfer, every date, every amount. 9 years of data in neat little columns. The total, when I finally added it up, made me sit down hard on my kitchen floor. $412,000. That's more than most people earn in a decade of full-time work. That's a house. That's Emma's entire college education 3 times over. That's 9 years of my life, converted into numbers on a screen, flowing in one direction only. But here's the thing they didn't know. Here's the secret I've been carrying for 3 years without even realizing its significance. When my parents refinanced their house in 2019, they asked me to co-sign the loan. They needed my income to qualify for better rates, they said. I signed the papers without reading them carefully, trusting that my father knew what he was doing. What I didn't realize until I consulted a lawyer after the accident was that I hadn't co-signed the loan. I'd been listed as the primary borrower. The house, the 3-bedroom colonial in Edina where my parents had lived for 15 years, was legally in my name. My parents had been living in my house, and I've been paying the mortgage on it for 9 years without knowing I owned it. When my lawyer explained this to me, I laughed. Then I cried. Then I asked her to explain it again because surely I'd misunderstood. I hadn't misunderstood. For 9 years, I'd been supporting a family that called me exhausting. For 9 years, I'd been paying for a house that was already mine. For 9 years, I'd been buying love that should have been freely given, and I hadn't even known I held all the cards. But I knew now, and that changed everything. They had no idea I'd been keeping records. They had no idea about the house. They thought I was just reliable Laura, practical Laura, the daughter who would always manage. They were about to find out how wrong they were. To understand what happened in that ambulance, you need to understand the pattern, the decades of small cuts that bled so slowly I didn't notice I was dying from them. Let me take you back to my 10th birthday. I'd asked for a telescope. I was obsessed with space that year, had checked out every astronomy book in the school library, spent hours in the backyard trying to identify constellations. A telescope was all I wanted. Kelsey's birthday was 3 weeks after mine. She'd asked for an easel, professional-grade paints, and a weekend trip to Chicago to visit the Art Institute. On the morning of my birthday, I ran downstairs to find a single wrapped package on the kitchen table. It was small, too small. I opened it to find a glow-in-the-dark star sticker set, the kind you could buy at the dollar store. My mother smiled and said we'd do something special later, maybe go out for ice cream. We didn't. She forgot by afternoon. 3 weeks later, Kelsey's birthday arrived. The easel was waiting in the living room, wrapped in a giant bow. The paints were arranged in a basket with brushes and canvases. My parents had booked a hotel in Chicago for the weekend. I remember standing in the doorway watching Kelsey squeal with excitement, and my father caught my eye. He must have seen something in my face because he walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. "Kelsey needs more support," he said quietly. "Art is competitive. You understand, don't you? You've always been so independent." I was 10 years old. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. I told myself it made sense. Kelsey was special. Kelsey needed things. I was just practical Lara, the one who could handle disappointment. That pattern repeated for 26 years. When Kelsey graduated from art school, the whole family flew to New York. 5-star hotel, fancy dinner, my father posting 17 photos on Facebook with captions about his talented, brilliant daughter. When I graduated from medical school, my parents arrived an hour and a half late. Kelsey had needed help hanging pieces for an upcoming show, they explained. They'd lost track of time. There were no photos except a blurry one in the parking lot, my mother already checking her phone as my father pressed the shutter. No celebration dinner, no proud Facebook posts, just a lukewarm "congratulations, sweetheart," before they rushed back to help Kelsey with her lighting. But the moment that broke something fundamental inside me, the moment I should have seen as the warning it was, happened 5 years ago when Emma was born. I'd had a difficult pregnancy. The father, a fellow resident I'd been dating for 8 months, walked out when I told him I was keeping the baby. I went through the next 4 months alone, working 60-hour weeks, studying for my boards, trying to prepare for single motherhood. The delivery was complicated. Emma was breech and the cord was wrapped around her neck. I ended up needing an emergency C-section, and then I hemorrhaged on the table. They almost lost me twice. I woke up in the ICU, alone, with my newborn daughter in the NICU being monitored for oxygen deprivation. I couldn't walk. I couldn't hold my baby. I was terrified and exhausted and desperate for someone, anyone, to be there. I called my parents from my hospital bed, my voice cracked and weak. I asked if they could come, just for a few days, to help me recover, to meet their granddaughter. My mother's response still echoes in my head. "Oh, honey, we wish we could come, but Kelsey is having such a hard time right now. Her divorce is really affecting her, and she needs us. You understand, don't you? You're a doctor. You know how to handle these things. You'll figure it out." Kelsey's divorce, her second divorce from a marriage that had lasted 14 months. That was more important than my nearly dying. That was more important than their first grandchild fighting for breath in a plastic box. I did figure it out. I hired a postpartum doula for $3,200 a week. I had groceries delivered. I recovered alone in my apartment while my parents posted Instagram photos from brunch with Kelsey, helping her through her difficult time. But the money kept flowing. $2,800 for the mortgage, $950 for the insurance, whatever else they needed. The automatic transfers continued like clockwork because I was still trying, still hoping that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, they would finally see me. I understand now that they never would have. Some people don't value what comes easy, and I had made myself too easy to take for granted. The accident was the end of that. It happened on a Tuesday evening after an 18-hour shift. I'd performed 3 surgeries that day, including a complicated spinal fusion on a teenager. I was exhausted but alert. I thought I was alert. The light turned green. I pulled into the intersection. The pickup truck ran the red doing 50 miles an hour and hit my driver's side door. I don't remember the impact. I remember the sound, metal screaming against metal, glass exploding inward. I remember spinning, then nothing. I woke up in the ambulance with the paramedic cutting away my scrubs and a pain in my legs so severe I couldn't breathe. When I looked down, I could see bone. The first thing I thought wasn't about myself. It was about Emma. Emma at daycare. Emma who needed to be picked up in 40 minutes. Emma who had no one else. That's when I sent the message. That's when my mother called me exhausting. That's when my sister responded with an emoji, and my father didn't respond at all. And that's when I stopped being their daughter. I lay there in that ambulance watching Derek the paramedic save those messages to my phone, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not grief, not even anger, just a cold, clear certainty. For 36 years, I'd believed that love was something you could earn, that if I was good enough, helpful enough, successful enough, my parents would finally see my value. I'd paid $400,000 for that belief. I'd nearly died for it, and all I'd gotten in return was an eye roll emoji. That was the moment I stopped crying and started planning. I need to tell you about Ruth. Ruth Anderson moved into the house next to mine 6 years ago, right after her husband of 42 years passed away from pancreatic cancer. She was 62 then, a retired nursing professor with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, and she introduced herself by bringing over a casserole and telling me my lawn looked terrible. I liked her immediately. Over the years, Ruth became something I didn't know I needed. Not a mother, exactly. My mother was still alive, still taking my money and my emotional energy, but Ruth was something else. A witness, a presence, someone who noticed. When I came home from the hospital pregnant and alone, Ruth was the one who showed up with frozen meals and practical advice. When I went into labor 3 weeks early, Ruth was the one I called, and she drove me to the hospital at 2 in the morning without complaint. She was there when Emma was born. She held my hand during the C-section because I had no one else. She was the first person besides the doctors to hold my daughter. Not my mother, not my father, Ruth. After the car accident, while my parents were enjoying Kelsey's gallery opening, Ruth got my message. She didn't text back. She just showed up at the hospital 30 minutes later, out of breath, her coat buttoned wrong. They called me from the childcare service, she said, her voice steady, even though her hands were shaking. I told them I'm Emma's grandmother. I hope that's all right. I burst into tears, right there in my hospital bed with a metal rod stabilizing my shattered leg and an IV pumping fluids into my arm. I sobbed while this woman who owed me nothing held my hand and told me it would be okay. Ruth stayed with Emma for 2 weeks while I recovered. She moved into my guest room, made school lunches, helped with homework, held my daughter when she cried about Mommy's alley. She did everything my parents should have done and never even considered doing. One evening, about a week after the accident, Ruth came to visit me in the hospital. She sat in the chair beside my bed and was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I've watched you for 6 years, Lara. I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion. I've watched you send money to people who never thank you. I've watched you wait by the phone for calls that never come." She reached over and took my hand. "I don't know what happened today with your family, but I know this. You are not exhausting. You are not a burden. You are one of the most remarkable young women I've ever known, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you." I couldn't speak. The words lodged in my throat like stones. Ruth squeezed my hand. "I don't have children of my own. Harold and I tried, but it wasn't meant to be." She paused. "But if I had a daughter, I would want her to be exactly like you. I hope you know that." For the first time in 36 years, I understood what family was supposed to feel like. Not obligation, not transaction, not endless giving without receiving. Just love. Simple and unconditional. 3 weeks after I got home from the hospital, I asked Ruth to have dinner with me. Over pasta and wine, I told her I wanted to make our relationship official. I wanted her to be Emma's legal guardian if anything happened to me. I wanted her in our lives, not as a neighbor, but as family. Ruth cried. I'd never seen her cry before. She said yes. That same week, I removed my parents as Emma's emergency contacts. I updated my will, my insurance, my medical proxy. Ruth Anderson was now listed as my next of kin. My mother, in a rare moment of reaching out, called to ask if I was feeling better and when I might be able to send the next mortgage payment, since I'd missed the last one. I told her the payments had stopped and I'd be in touch when I was ready to talk. She sputtered about responsibility, about family obligation, about how they'd always been there for me, and this was how I repaid them. I hung up. Then I blocked her number, and my father's, and Kelsey's. For the first time in nearly a decade, the automatic transfers stopped. The phone stopped ringing. The guilt stopped gnawing at my chest. I spent those recovery weeks with Emma and Ruth. We watched movies, we played board games. Ruth taught Emma how to make sugar cookies while I supervised from my wheelchair. We laughed. We were happy. It was the most peaceful 2 months of my life. But I knew it couldn't last. I knew my family would come eventually, demanding explanations, demanding money, demanding their version of normal. I knew there would be a reckoning. I just didn't know it would happen at my father's 70th birthday party. 6 weeks after the accident, my leg had healed enough for me to walk with a cane. I was back at work part-time, rebuilding my strength. The lawyers had finished their research. I knew exactly what I owned and exactly what I was owed. I was ready. My parents, meanwhile, had no idea anything had changed. In their world, my silence was temporary, a tantrum. They had seen me upset before, had watched me retreat into work and busyness when things got hard. They assumed this was more of the same. Practical, reliable Lara would calm down eventually. She always did. My mother left voicemails I didn't listen to. My father sent emails I deleted without reading. Kelsey, predictably, didn't reach out at all. Why would she? She'd never had to work for my attention before. But what they couldn't ignore were the missing payments. The first call came 3 weeks after I blocked their numbers. My mother used my aunt's phone, her voice tight with poorly concealed panic. Laura, there's been some kind of error with the mortgage. The bank says they haven't received payment in 2 months. Can you look into it? I told her I'd handle it. Then I hung up. The second call came from my father a week later, this time from a colleague's phone. His voice was different, smaller. Laura, we need to talk. I don't know what's going on, but we're getting notices from the insurance company threatening to cancel our coverage. There must be a mistake somewhere. I told him I'd look into it. Then I hung up. I didn't look into anything. I let them sit in the silence I'd been drowning in for years. Meanwhile, my family's social media told an interesting story. Kelsey posted photos from her gallery opening, the one they'd chosen over my emergency. My mother commented, "Beautiful, so proud," on every single one. My father posted a photo of himself at a golf outing, captioned, "Blessed life," with a grinning emoji. No mention of me, no mention of the accident, no acknowledgement that anything was wrong. 3 weeks before my father's 70th birthday, my mother managed to get through to my work phone. Her voice was different now, frantic. "Lara, please, I don't understand what's happening. We got a letter from the bank about the house, something about foreclosure proceedings. This has to be a mistake. Can you just call them and explain?" I let her ramble for 3 minutes. Then I said 5 words. "I own that house, Mom." Silence. "What?" "The house is in my name. I'm the primary on the mortgage, have been for 3 years. Didn't Dad tell you?" More silence. Then she hung up. I found out later from my Aunt Eleanor, who'd always quietly been on my side, that the revelation about the house caused a massive fight between my parents. My father had apparently known about the arrangement, but had convinced himself it didn't matter. He'd assumed I would never notice, never care, never do anything about it. He'd assumed wrong. 1 week before the party, I received an invitation in the mail. Thick cream cardstock, elegant calligraphy. Richard Benson's 70th birthday celebration, hosted at the Minneapolis Country Club, black tie optional. Included was a handwritten note from my mother. "Please come. We need to talk as a family. Let's put this unpleasantness behind us. We love you, Mom." I read that note 5 times. "We love you." After 36 years, she still thought those words meant something. She still thought she could wave them like a magic wand and make everything okay. I RSVP'd yes. Then I called my Aunt Eleanor, and I made a plan. They thought my silence meant I'd given up. They thought my attendance meant surrender. They had no idea I was walking into that party with 9 years of evidence and a team of witnesses. What happened next would change everything. The Minneapolis Country Club had hosted my parents' anniversary parties, Kelsey's first wedding reception, and countless holiday dinners over the years. I knew the main ballroom well. The crystal chandeliers, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the golf course, the parquet floors that clicked under expensive heels. I'd never felt comfortable there. Too formal, too pretentious, too full of people who measured worth in golf handicaps and stock portfolios. But tonight, I walked in like I owned the place. Which, in a metaphorical sense, I did. Emma was with Ruth at home. I'd considered bringing them both, but this wasn't Emma's fight, and Ruth had agreed to stand on standby in case I needed emotional support afterward. My Aunt Eleanor was already there, stationed near the bar with a clear view of the room. Her husband, my Uncle Bernard, a retired family court judge, stood beside her. I told them everything, every payment, every missed birthday, every excuse, every dismissal, every time I'd been called exhausting or dramatic or too sensitive. And then I showed them the spreadsheet. My Aunt Eleanor had cried. Uncle Bernard had gone very quiet, then asked a lot of questions about the house and the legal documentation. When I told them what I wanted to do, they both agreed without hesitation. Tonight, my father stood near the fireplace, looking distinguished in his tuxedo, accepting congratulations from business partners and old friends. My mother floated through the room in a champagne-colored gown, laughing graciously, playing the perfect hostess. Kelsey was there too, in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She'd brought her latest boyfriend, a venture capitalist with 2 white teeth and an aggressive handshake. I wore a simple black dress, professional, understated. I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there to make a statement. They saw me the moment I entered. My mother's smile flickered. My father's hand tightened around his champagne glass. Kelsey whispered something to her boyfriend, her eyes never leaving mine. I walked straight toward them. "Laura!" My mother recovered first, leaning in for an air kiss I didn't return. "You came. We're so glad. Let's find a quiet moment later to talk, shall we? Just the family." I smiled. "Actually, Mom, I think tonight is perfect for a family conversation." Before she could respond, I turned and walked toward the small stage where a microphone had been set up for the birthday toasts. Aunt Eleanor caught my eye and nodded. Uncle Bernard moved toward my parents, positioning himself between them and the nearest exit. I stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted slowly, conversations trailing off as people noticed something unexpected was happening. My father's face had gone pale. My mother was gripping his arm. "Good evening, everyone." I projected my voice the way I'd learned to do in operating rooms and conference presentations. "For those who don't know me, I'm Laura Benson, Richard's youngest daughter." Polite smiles, a few waves from distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. "I know this is supposed to be a celebration of my father's 70th birthday, and it is, but I think birthdays should also be a time for honesty, for acknowledging the truth of who we are and what we've done." I paused, letting the silence settle. "So I'd like to share some truths tonight, with your permission, Dad." My father's mouth opened. No sound came out. "Wonderful. I'll take that as a yes." The room was utterly silent now. Even the waiters had stopped moving. 9 years ago, my father called me asking for help with the mortgage. He said it was just 1 month, just a small bind. I was happy to help. That's what family does. I let that land. But that 1 month became 96 months, 8 years of continuous payments, $2,800 every single month. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back said, "Jesus." I also paid for their health insurance after my father's company dropped their coverage. $950 a month for 6 years. That's another $68,400. My mother had started crying, small, delicate tears that she dabbed at with a handkerchief, the performance of a wounded party. There were also the emergencies, car repairs, the new roof, the furnace replacement, the credit card debt, and let's not forget the loans to my sister Kelsey for her artistic endeavors. $45,000 over 9 years. She promised to pay it back. She never did. Kelsey's face had gone red. Her boyfriend was looking at her with an expression I couldn't quite read. In total, over the past 9 years, I have transferred $412,000 to support my parents and sister. I let that number hang in the air. That's more than most people earn in a decade of full-time work. I earned that money performing surgeries, putting in 80-hour weeks, missing holidays and birthdays in my daughter's first steps, and I gave it freely because I believed that's what family meant. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo Derek the paramedic had saved. 2 months ago, I was in a car accident, a serious one. I had a compound fracture in my leg and internal bleeding. I was being rushed to emergency surgery. From the ambulance, I sent a message to my family asking for help. My daughter was at daycare. I needed someone to pick her up. I held up the phone so the people in the front could see the screenshot. This was my mother's response. "You've always been exhausting. We're at Kelsey's gallery opening. Handle it yourself." My sister's response was an eye-roll emoji. My father didn't respond at all. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers. Someone said, "That's disgusting," loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother stood up, her voice shrill. "This is being taken out of context. We didn't know it was serious. We thought she was exaggerating like she always does." "Did you call back to check?" I asked calmly. "Did you visit me in the hospital? Did you ask about your granddaughter?" Silence. The answer, for anyone wondering, is no. The only person who came to that hospital was my neighbor, a woman with no blood relation to me at all. She stayed with my daughter for 2 weeks while I recovered. She was more of a mother to me in those 2 weeks than my own mother has been in 36 years. Uncle Bernard stepped forward then, his voice carrying the authority of 40 decades on the bench. "There's one more thing the family should know," he said. "I've reviewed the legal documents. When Richard refinanced the house in 2019, he listed Laura as the primary borrower, not a cosigner. The house has been in Laura's name for 3 years. My father's face went gray. Laura has been paying the mortgage on her own property, and she has exercised her legal right as the property owner. I took the microphone back. I'm selling the house. My parents have 90 days to find alternative arrangements. The proceeds will go into my daughter's college fund. I paused. I want to be clear. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because for 36 years, I believed love was something you could earn. I thought if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, was helpful enough, my parents would finally see my value. I looked directly at my mother. I was wrong. Love isn't a transaction. It's not a reward for being useful, and no amount of money can buy something that should have been freely given from the start. The silence in that room said everything. I set down the microphone and walked through the crowd. People parted from me. Some reached out to touch my arm, to whisper, "I'm so sorry," or "You did the right thing." Others just stared. Kelsey's boyfriend was gone. I found out later he'd left during my speech, hadn't even said goodbye. My father tried to intercept me near the door. His face was wet with tears I wasn't sure were real. "Laura, please, we can fix this. We can talk. Don't do this." I stopped, looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years. "You had 9 years to talk, Dad. You had 400,000 opportunities to say thank you, to ask how I was doing, to show up when I needed you. You didn't." I touched his arm gently. "I don't hate you, but I'm done pretending this is okay. I'm done being your burden." And then I walked out. That was 3 months ago. The house sold in 34 days. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a suburb they used to look down on. My father took a part-time job at a hardware store. My mother started doing bookkeeping for a local church. They weren't thriving, but they were surviving. For the first time in their lives, they had to rely on themselves. Kelsey's Gallery lost its primary sponsor 3 weeks after the party. Word travels fast in Minneapolis, and apparently, nobody wanted to be associated with the family that abandoned their daughter in an ambulance. Last I heard, she was waitressing at a bistro downtown, trying to rebuild her reputation. The family group chat was deleted. The invitations stopped. My parents faded from the social calendar they'd worked so hard to climb. But something unexpected happened too. 2 months after the party, Kelsey called me. Not from a blocked number or through a relative. She called from her own phone and left a voicemail I almost deleted without listening. I'm glad I didn't. "Lara, it's Kelsey." Her voice was small, stripped of its usual polish. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I don't expect you to respond, but I needed to say this out loud. I'm sorry, not just for the gallery opening, for all of it. For 36 years of letting you carry everything while I took. For laughing at that text message. For every time I watched Mom and Dad treat you like you didn't matter and said nothing." She paused, her breath shaky. "I didn't know about the money, not all of it. I told myself the loans didn't matter because you had more than me. I told myself you were fine because you never complained. But that was a lie I chose to believe because it was convenient." Another pause. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see it now, what I was, what we all did to you, and I'm trying to be different." I listened to that voicemail 4 times. Then I saved it, not because I was ready to forgive, not because anything had been healed, but because for the first time, someone in my family had acknowledged the truth. That was something. Today, 3 months later, I sit in my living room watching Emma play with the dog Ruth gave her for her birthday. Ruth is in the kitchen making tea, humming something soft and familiar. The college fund has $260,000 in it. My leg is almost fully healed. I'm back to performing surgeries, back to fixing what's broken. Some things can't be fixed, though. Some breaks are too deep, too old, too calcified into the bone to ever fully mend. My parents and I may never have a real relationship. Kelsey and I may never be sisters in any meaningful way. But that's okay. Because the family I have now, Ruth and Emma, and the friends who showed up when my blood relatives wouldn't, they're enough. More than enough. I used to think setting boundaries was selfish. I used to think that family meant sacrifice without limit, giving until there was nothing left. I used to believe that love was something you could earn if you just tried hard enough, gave enough, were enough. I was wrong. Love isn't earned, it's given. Freely, without conditions, without transaction, and anyone who makes you pay for it doesn't deserve you. Blood made them my relatives, but it never made them my family. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the family member everyone takes for granted, please hit that like button and subscribe. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to draw a boundary with family? How did it change your life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's still carrying a weight that was never theirs, share it with them. You're not selfish. You're not ungrateful. You're not a burden. You're finally free. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.